Hello, and welcome to another episode of Game, Develop, Repeat, the podcast where we talk about a game that I enjoy, what makes it special, and what we, as game developers, can learn from it. I'm your host, Chris, a music educator turned indie game developer, and today's episode is all about Planescape Torment. In this episode, we discuss completionism, choices, raising the stakes, world building, analysis paralysis, and dynamic difficulty. Let's get to it. I find it really interesting sometimes to think about a game which I absolutely adore, a game which I think is a 10 out of 10 masterpiece level, like game that I absolutely love, but have not yet beaten. And I think with this particular title, Planescape Torment, the reason that I haven't beaten this game has to do with what makes it such a good game. I think the reason I haven't beaten it is because of what a absolute masterpiece it is. The things that make it so good interact with my psychology in some specific way that makes me end up not completing it, or at least did that in the past. I do think if I were to return to this game at this phase of my life, I could probably get through the whole thing and would have an incredible experience doing so. In fact, I need to do that. I'm not doing it right this moment. There are all these other games on my list. But one of these days, we're going back to that game and we are going to dive deep into it. And I look forward to that day so much because this episode is going to get me hyped for that. I don't even know if I'm going to be able to play other games tonight. I'm probably going to end up downloading Planescape Torment again. Maybe not. That's a really, really big commitment. But this game is a good old CRPG, and it executes on, let's go through this a little bit, why I'm so obsessed with this game, why I'm raving about this game that I haven't even beaten. It executes so well on its world building, on its characters, most importantly, the choices that you make in this game. The choices feel so substantial, and I mean throughout the whole game. All the choices that I make when I play this game feel important to me. Every little dialogue option, every stat selection that I make, your stats have a significant impact on your options and the way you play the game and the difficulty of the game. There's a lot going on in terms of the options that you have and the impact that your decisions make. And for me, at the time that I first played this game, that was overwhelming. I was like, what? The consequences are too large. And I was so invested too. I was looking at this like, I have to do the right thing. And I was very completionist and I wanted to do everything in this game. This is the most choose your own adventure novel kind of feel that I've had in a CRPG. I mean, I've played a bunch of CRPGs, but the feeling that I have in this game is it feels like when you open a door, other doors shut. And I can't say with 100% confidence that I'm correct about that, but that is how it felt to me as I played it. And that is the impact it had on me. I felt that every stat choice that I made, I was sacrificing other stats. I felt that every faction that I interacted with and like tried to kind of align myself with and work with, I was closing off other opportunities. It really makes you feel like I am committing to these choices. I mean, I know our last episode was talking about committing a little bit, but this really does have that heavy impact of like, well, I've chosen to do this now. If you have played Disco Elysium, that has a lot of the same feeling for me. When you make a choice in that game, it feels pretty heavy on the commitment for me, but that's because I play that game without save scumming, so maybe that's a big part of that. But it does have this feeling of like you're going down a path and there's no turning back, right? And for me, that can be trouble because I can be a little bit of a completionist, or at least I used to be. These days, I found that I have a lot more fun playing games by letting go of that completionism. That's for me. That's how I work right now. I'm like, if I let go of this completionist thing, I'm going to have a lot more fun. I'm going to enjoy myself. But the choices all feel impactful, and it feels like no matter what you do, it's not gonna be 100% right. Everything, because of the way the world is constructed, because of how gritty things are, because of how concerning everything kind of is, and there's no 100% clear this is the good choice. Everything feels a little bit wrong. Everything feels a little bit off. And I'm going to reference Disco Elysium more than once in this episode. I feel like Disco Elysium drew on Planescape Torment real heavily because it gives me the same feeling as Planescape Torment. There are times when I'm playing that game and I go, oh man, there's really no right choice here. I just have to pick, and it's like very punishing, and the world is just a world that makes you go, oh, there's no like rainbow sunshine ending to this. This is going to be rough. That's how Planescape Torment feels to me. And it is beautiful. It's hard to put words to the particular and unique emotional impact that this game has on me. It's such a weird combination of feelings, and I'm so interested in it. It doesn't make me feel horrified. It doesn't make me feel completely enthralled by what's going on in the world, but it has this weird feeling of like, this is all just wrong, and I have to kind of deal with it and navigate it, and I'm so lost, but I just kind of have to fake my way through it, and it's absolutely fascinating, and I wish I could put more words to this, or more clear words to this, but it creates such a feeling of mystery and a little bit of like bumbling around, but there's also a certain amount of competence that you feel throughout it, because you're like, wow, I'm managing to navigate this despite the fact that I'm such a fool, despite the fact that I don't know what's going on. I'm navigating all these bizarre social interactions. I'm learning about this world that is completely and totally different from anything I expected when I entered. And that is one of the elements that I feel Disco Elysium really draws from Planescape Torment. I do think that's one of the biggest ways that it's influenced by Planescape Torment, is it has that same feeling of like, whoa, this is disorienting. Why do I not know what's going on? It's got that sort of a thing to it. A little bit of backstory on this game. This is going to be like first 10 minutes of the game. No real spoilers going on for Planescape Torment. You wake up in a situation where you have like lost your memories. That's the deal. And you wake up in, how do I give more detail than that? I don't want to give more detail than that. I'm going to leave it at that because I do want this experience to be very fresh for anybody who goes in on it. I'm so intense about spoilers. For me, there's this thing where if somebody tells me one little detail, it can really change the impact of a game for me. So the only bit I'm going to give you is you wake up in a situation where you don't really have a good understanding of what is happening around you, and you don't really have memories. I'm only going to give you that much. So from that perspective, it creates a much more interesting dynamic with interacting with this world and making choices, and the impact of your choices is kind of unknown a lot of the time. You're like, this is a little rough, but depending on what stats you've chosen, you can make more or less informed choices, or you have different options. It feels like it is a really good game of Dungeons and Dragons with a dungeon master that knows exactly what they're doing, right? It's really nice. It's really nice to be able to play this game and have these very unique options based on your character. And I cannot begin to imagine the amount of hard work and writing that went into creating all of the options available in this game. It is astounding. It is extremely impressive how full of options this game feels. And it is one of its strengths and also one of the reasons that it overwhelmed me. It was very hard for me playing this game, and I think a lot of people will have this experience. Honestly, I'd be surprised if I'm the only person who has this experience. We're very used to games allowing you to experience basically everything the game has to offer, and I think one of the strengths of this game is that it doesn't feel like you're going to get to do that. You're playing this game, you're living a life, and that's the deal, man. You're getting through it, and that's that. You got to play through it. You can't experience everything in one playthrough. You have to make sacrifices. You have to make hard choices. And if you are a player who runs into a lot of paralysis by analysis and like excessive, I have to make the right choice in this game and all that stuff, you got to let go of that in this game if you're going to get through it. And you know what? Even if you can't let go of that, I still recommend experiencing some of this game because, wow, it's so cool. I realize I'm just fanboying out about this. This is one that's easy to get access to, by the way. You can absolutely play this game on Steam. From what I glanced at, now I have not played the Steam port, but from what I glanced at, it looks like it's well received, so I assume that it is a pretty good port. It could be the thing where everybody reviews positive so that they get more old games ported, but it doesn't seem like that. Usually people are pretty aggressive about giving negative reviews to bad ports. So it seems like it is a good, I said port, a good, I don't know what the correct term would be, a good re-release, a good modernization. I mean, it's not like a remaster or anything. It's just they've released it again and it's like enhanced edition or whatever so that it's playable on modern machines. I'm so used to saying port now just because I've been dealing with like talking with people about like Final Fantasy ports and like all that stuff because 16 just came out and it's like, well, hopefully, right? Hopefully one of these days we'll get a port and it'll actually be like a really solid one, and fingers crossed, because you never really know with those games whenever they come to PC, although they do seem to be getting better, hopefully, maybe. Anyway, back to Planescape Torment. The world building is fascinating. There's all of these different sort of factions that you interact with. The ones that stick out in my head immediately are, you know what? Don't worry about it. I think they're called the Dusties. That doesn't spoil anything, but there are like different factions you can interact with. There's different interesting characters. There's a lot of like weird pseudo kind of political lore. The world has a very compelling art style to it that feels a little bit, I mean, it's definitely kind of gritty, a little bit mysterious, mystical, I think. Maybe mystical would be a good word for parts of it, but not in like a high fantasy way, more of a kind of a grittier mystery. I don't want to put it in line with like Diablo 2 art style. We're not quite there, but it is definitely closer to that than it would be to like a lighter hearted high fantasy thing. It is definitely pretty dark in terms of like story stuff. It is, man, this is the other part of this game, is there's this feeling that there are infinite possibilities when I play it. Whenever I play this game, it feels like any corner that I explore is going to have some weird thing. Anybody I talk to is going to have some interesting thing that I didn't know about. Everything I do is going to lead down this odd rabbit hole, and it's going to vary based on my stats. Somebody who I talk to in one playthrough where I have a high intelligence stat, let's say, I might be able to have a great conversation with them and get connected with them and start working with them on something and go down this whole massive quest line that's really important and ends up being absolutely extremely consequential for my character, right? And then I might go and talk to that quest person on a different playthrough where I don't have high intelligence. And I just can't go down that quest line, right? It's just completely, I'm not even able to find out that it exists. It's that boxed out for me. Like, it's like you don't know what's going on here at all. This is just some person, whatever. Who knows? This is a game where I would talk about it with my brother at one point, and he was like, "Oh, you got to talk to this person." I'm like, what are you talking about? They don't have any dialogue options for me. Like, it was like that level of experience for me, where it just felt like I was playing a whole different game than somebody else. And like, some of this is that I experienced it in childhood, and maybe my memory is the tiniest bit warped of it, right? Like, I don't want to overhype it, and I probably am a little bit, right? Like, nostalgia plays a role, but this is one that's worth playing if you're into these old school CRPGs. And I hope that with Baldur's Gate 3 and people playing that, people do that old deep dive and go, what other games are like this? What else do we have in this genre? And I hope that people go around and they go, hey, what is this Planescape Torment thing? This looks interesting. And start playing it, because what an experience. Let me see if I can hit all of my bullet points here, because I had a couple notes that I wanted to make sure that I hit when I talk about this game. Oh, the difficulty thing. I think that your choices in this game are going to affect the difficulty of the game a lot for you. I think that how you design your character, the choices that you're making, how you're navigating the world, how you're interacting with other people is going to have a big impact on the difficulty. And that's something that I'm really interested in. I love this concept, right? I love this concept of difficulty based on player action rather than based on a slider, right? I love this idea that when you play a game, there are consequences to your actions. That is something that RPGs can take advantage of in the coolest ways. But boy, it's probably one of those like overwhelming design things, right? Like, the more I learn about designing video games, the more impressed I am by games that really dive deep on like the choice trees, because like the amount of content that you are making that people are not going to see, it requires such a high degree of confidence in everything that you are making to not force every player to see everything, right? You're going, all of this is so good that it doesn't matter what part of the game you interact with, because you're going to love it, because it's all just that good. You're going to make your choices and it's going to lead you to something that you love. That's the other thing. You're like reading players' minds to a certain degree and saying, oh, the players who make this choice are going to like this stuff, so let's lead them down this hole, lead them down this path. That's so cool. I love it so much. But oh man, the amount of effort and design that goes into that is that's so interesting to me. That's such a cool thing. I would love to make a game that is much more story and character driven at some point, but boy, we got to develop some skills to get there. We got to keep working on things. We got to release my first platformer first, right? We got to really sink my teeth into a lot of other stuff before I can bite off something with one of these giant choice trees going on. Okay, let's talk about how we can think about this game in terms of our own development. How can we apply stuff from this game that I just fanboyed out about for like 15 minutes? More than that, probably. How can we apply lessons from this game to our own game development? I'm betting that there's quite a lot we can do. So let's investigate that together. One thing that Planescape Torment does beautifully is make you want to explore the world, makes you want to explore every nook and cranny of this interesting, fascinating world so that you can understand what is going on around you. So my question is, how can I make my worlds feel worth exploring? If I'm doing a story-based game, if you're doing a story-based game, one trick that I noticed that is really effective, and this is like a major framing thing, so this may not work for everything, right? If you've already got an established story going, but one just trick is the player does not understand, or how should I phrase this? The player of the game knows as much about the world as the character in the world knows. So have your character not remember anything, right? That's a trick people use all the time so that you can introduce them to the world, whole new interesting thing. I in my opinion, this gets overused in some forms of media. And I think that it works really well if the world is so unfamiliar that you are pulled away from the fact that this is a trope. If the world is so interesting, bizarre, and unfamiliar, where you're just like, whoa, I'm so glad that I get to know this world alongside this character. And if the reason that the character doesn't know what's going on is compelling, interesting, and relatable enough, and is not just some weird throwaway magical thing, or if it is, then it's comical or whatever. It needs to be well integrated, right? It needs to be something that the player goes, yeah, I like this. I'm invested in this. I can believe that this is what's going on. The other element of this is just making the world have little secrets, have little things that you're okay with the player missing. This is something I've talked about once before. This is something I heard in a GDC talk by the guy who did the Stanley Parable. Let players miss things. Don't make them see everything. Let them miss things. And this is a little trickier for what I'm working on at the moment with my platformer. I guess putting secrets in, I'm not sure how. I have ideas on how I could execute that within my platformer. That is fair. There are ways that I could do that, but it's not. Okay, well, I guess adding an element of mystery is a good point to this. Like, to make your world feel worth exploring by adding an element of mystery, adding a certain degree of reward for the exploration that you do. Something, it needs to feel worthwhile, I think, is what I'm really getting at. And I think you need to have the opportunity to explore. It can't all be linear. I'm stating the obvious here, though. What is the real takeaway from Planescape Torment? What is it that it is doing differently? What is it that it is doing on a whole nother level? I really think that what it's doing is something that applies much more to story-based games. And what it's doing is making you deeply curious about the world around you. You know what? Maybe that doesn't just apply to story-based games, but this is the deeper level. It's making you so curious. You want to know, right? When you play this game, you want to know what's going on. You're not in here because you're just trying to get through the game. I'm not playing Planescape Torment because I'm trying to get from A to B and clear the game and finish putting in my 50 hours. I'm playing Planescape Torment because I want to understand what the heck is going on with this place. I want to know. And that is what makes it so worth exploring. That's what it really is. Like, yeah, we can talk about level design. That's huge. That's really important. We can talk about all of these other factors. We can talk about putting secrets everywhere. That's cool. That's huge. But the thing that's making this one stand out is that you want to know. It's not secrets, you know? It's not, oh, there's so many cool paths. I wonder what's down this. No, you for me, I keep saying you, I'm really talking about me. I desperately want to understand what is going on when I play that game. I am like, please let me understand this world. Give me more information. I need to know. So that's what it's doing in a very unique way. And I think that is sometimes applicable and sometimes really hard to apply to your game. I don't know if I can apply that. Oh, you know what? Okay, look, without doing insane scope creep, I don't know that I can apply that to my game. There is a certain degree of like, you can make a platformer make you desperately want to know what's going on in the game. Look at Hollow Knight, right? Hollow Knight's got all these things where you're like, what's going on here? What is this? But I mean, it's more of a Metroidvania, but it's still, it's based in platforming mechanics. Yeah, you can have these things where you're deeply curious about what's going on in the world with a platformer. I just don't want to make my scope go completely out of control because this is my first major project. So we're just not going to go crazy with that at the moment. But boy, is that something I want to do in the future. Oh man, that seems like a great idea. Next thing that it's doing beautifully, Planescape Torment, that is, it is adding stakes, adding consequences to all of your decisions. There's like this butterfly effect thing that goes through my brain every time I make a single decision in this game. I'm like, how is this going to bite me? How is this going to help me? That's really cool. So how can I do that in my own game development? Maybe not in the game I'm working on right now, but how could we do that in our own game development? How could you do it? I think for a story-based game, I think the mistake that I make, the mistake that I automatically go to is, oh, well, just have every action have these echoing consequences through the whole game. And then the problem with that is it becomes this infinite, combinatorial explosion. It becomes this mess where, like, oh, I said no to this person. So then the entire story has to shift, and I have to write 5 novels in order to write the plot for this 2-hour long game. Like, it becomes insane if you really want to do it on that level. So how can we do this without, like, add enough of this without doing it on that level? Because we don't have teams of 100 people. We don't have millions of dollars. How can we very efficiently add stakes to the smaller decision? I think one big move is making stats have a significant impact on gameplay and making that impact feel like a real choice. So if the impact is just like, oh, you do 1 more damage, it's usually that's not going to feel like a real choice. I mean, I'm sure there are contexts in which it will, depending on your scaling for your game and whatever. But if you are making a choice between 2 very fundamentally different abilities, if you're making a choice between a movement ability and like a damage ability, that can be very significant. And you can have the consequence of that be this area of the game. Let's say we're taking a Metroidvania. This area of the game is not open to you unless you have this ability. So now you have to do these areas in a different order, and that has different consequences or whatever, right? Something closer to that. Something where your stats are having a strong effect on the order of the gameplay even. I mean, that's like, seems like a little bit of a cop out, but it's a starting point. And I'm all about starting points. I'm about getting a taste of this so that we can start experimenting with it and seeing how far we can go with it. So that's a good starting point. You could also make rather than it be a decision that echoes through the entire game, you could focus on your relationships with individual characters. I think this is something Planescape Torment is doing. It's focusing on your relationships with different factions. So the consequences are a little bit more locked into your interactions with these factions rather than your interactions with hundreds of individual characters. I'm speaking slightly from a place of ignorance, I'm realizing right now, because I have not beaten it, so there's a lot of stuff I don't know about the in-game consequences. I'm making a couple assumptions here, but I'm doing it for the sake of a thought experiment. If we were to make a game where we focus on the factions rather than all the individuals, then we can lock down the combinatorial explosion a lot. You can bring it down to something manageable. Even if it is still kind of crazy, it is not infinite. It's not something that will destroy the rest of your life because you're just trying to manage this one exponential thing for your entire development cycle. And then before you know it, like, it's been 20 years and you release your game and everybody's like, this looks like it was made 20 years ago. And you're like, that's because it was. So that's my thoughts on adding. Those are my thoughts, on adding stakes to the smaller decisions. You can focus on interactions with groups. You can focus on stats and how they impact gameplay. And I guess you could also do things where, like, certain paths close off to you. And the other thing you could do is you could make the game more of an Iron Man situation where you can't save scum. That's always an option. But sometimes I think, let people save scum. People have different play styles, whatever. Maybe give them the Iron Man option. But I guess that's a different conversation. Other aspect, which I talked about at the very end of the last segment, how Planescape Torment makes difficulty a little bit responsive to player choice, because depending on how you're playing the game, it feels more or less difficult. What paths you're taking, how you're interacting with people seems to have some degree of impact. Not necessarily an enormous impact. I can't speak with confidence about that, but it does have some degree of impact. This is the problem with doing an episode on a game I haven't beaten and haven't played in a long time. It makes it a little difficult to like really speak confidently about certain elements, but it does have some degree of impact on the difficulty. So like your stat choices and what choices you're making. I think that this like dynamic difficulty option is really interesting. So how do we make difficulty more responsive to what the player is choosing? How do we make it so that like, oh, you've chosen to go down the strength route, so now anything that's based on intelligence is going to be a little trickier for you. Oh, you're really avoiding being a wise person, so you're going to have to be able to brute strength your way through things, right? How do we kind of give you a little bit of consequence for your choices here? I think that's actually kind of the answer. Is you give consequence for your choices, right? You give a reward, but you give an equal consequence, or maybe slightly lesser. I don't know. But if there's a player who goes, my character does not need to have any strength whatsoever, I think it can be a little fun to go, okay, and make them feel genuinely extremely weak, right? Don't give them the video game weak character thing where like, yeah, you're weak, but you can still beat 99% of the population in an arm wrestling match because you're the hero. Don't give them that. Be like, you are weak. You are unable to lift your backpack because it's full of too much heavy stuff. It is a genuine detriment to your ability to adventure. Make it actually difficult for them. If they're dumb, they're dumb. And I'm not saying be a jerk about it. Nobody likes that, like, oh, okay, I shouldn't say it that way. But it can be very frustrating to have a dungeon master who is like, well, I'm sorry, but you can't have a conversation with other people because you're too dumb, right? Like, or your charisma is so bad that you say hello to the. Actually, that's a little bit funny, but in terms of actual gameplay, it could be a problem. You say hello to the guard, and they think that you are threatening them, and they attack you, and whatever, right? Like, you could make a fun plot out of that, actually, and I kind of like the idea if it was executed really well. But if it's executed poorly, if it just feels like it's weird, vindictive punishment, that's a whole different thing. But if it's interesting punishment, if it leads you down an interesting new plot line, but is still very difficult, that's fascinating. As far as something that is not a choice-based game, difficulty more responsive to player choice. I feel like I've done this a little bit in Soot because of I have that new mechanic where if you die, it leaves a little light where you died. Did I mention that in the last episode? I think I did. Well, if I didn't, there's this new mechanic where if you die, you leave a little light where you died. You leave a little like corpse light so that you can see the hazards in that area more clearly as you're working through the game. So it's sort of an adaptive difficulty thing. I think things like that. What is another good example of this? This is a hard one to come up with examples for, because it's easy to just like scale stats or whatever, but it's a little harder to do something that's like, or not harder. It's a little more like thought intensive to come up with something where the gameplay changes in a way that makes it just a hair easier for the player. Not so much easier that they feel like you're giving them, like handling them with the kid gloves. That feels like that needs to be optional, right? Like, I mean, like, introduce the option, but don't force it on them, right? I'm having trouble brainstorming ideas for it. I'm gonna leave that to you because I can't come up with more right now. Making difficulty more responsive to player choice or to like repeated player death or to whatever is happening to the player. How can you make the difficulty not just a slider, but something where the gameplay is getting modified just the slightest bit as the difficulty, as it becomes evident that it's too difficult for the player or too easy for the player or what have you. If you have ideas on that, I would love to hear those because I am genuinely stumped, and that is something I'm very interested in because I think that is a extremely useful game design mechanic. I think that there's probably a lot of potential there that I'm not fully grasping or understanding. Last question for this section before we talk a little bit about my own game development this week. Do you want to do any of these things? Do you want to make the world big and worth exploring, or not necessarily big? Do you want to make the world feel worth exploring? Do you want to add stakes to the small decisions? Do you want to make difficulty responsive? Your game, you may not want to have a world that you want to explore. It may just be a challenging game. You might be making Super Hexagon. You might be making a game where it's just like arcade style. You might not want stakes. You might want the game to be really relaxing. You might want something that is just so chill and has comfy vibes and is just so lovely to play. I'm about to buy a bunch of comfy vibe games, by the way. There's this Humble Bundle thing going on. I love comfy vibe games. they're so nice. And then the last question, right? Do you want to make difficulty responsive to players' choice? Do you want to make like dynamic difficulty? That can be frustrating sometimes. Is it a choice that actually fits with your game, right? Do you want to mess with the scaling? Sometimes that can bother people. Sometimes you want the player to be able to just keep slamming their head against this challenge, come back the next day, and then have no problem with it because they slept on it. That can be part of the reward of the game. So always good to kind of come back around to that and be like, well, yeah, these are cool ideas, but are they what I want in my game? Does leaving them out add more to the game than adding them in? Is there actually value added here? Is this what my game looks like? Is this what I'm envisioning for this game? Or is this just a cool idea that I'm just like interested in because I like Planescape Torment a lot and I've been talking about it a lot? Real quick, just for my own game development stuff, kind of devlog-y stuff, real quick. I'm not trying to spin forever on this one. Paralysis in level design is the note that I have jotted to myself. I feel like I have a set of levels where it's crystal clear to me exactly what I want these levels to be, exactly what I want them to teach the player, all that stuff. And then because I'm used to my own game, it's hard for me to keep adding to those and elaborating on those ideas and being like, yeah, do this from this perspective now. Because I'm like, no, but they know now. They've done it once, so now they have it down, right? So I've gotten a little paralyzed in level design and going, okay, when do I want to reintroduce this mechanic? How do I want to reintroduce this? How many times do they need to see this? Is this still fun if they're doing it again, right? Like this soon? Like mapping the levels, all this stuff. And I reached this point where I went, you know what? I just need to make a bunch of levels. I just need to make a bunch of levels and try playing them. And like, it might be wasted time, but I need to feel these levels out. I need to try them. I can't just sit here thinking about it. I have to try it. And then I can like basically bug test it. I'm basically just coding, but it's level design. I'm just like, try the thing, check it out, bug test the parts that don't feel fun, and then maybe just rewrite the whole block of code, or the level in this case, and say, oh, well, that didn't work at all. Why didn't it work? This particular structure of levels just doesn't work. I just have to test it. Like, I can't just sit here and be paralyzed at the level design and go, oh, what do I need to do next? What about next? What's the next level? Nope. I need to make a ton of levels, try them, have them suck, and then make a bunch more levels, try them, and then take like 3 of those and put them in the game. And it's just going to be a pain, and that's fine. But I was playing one of the levels that I made the other day, and I had a moment, and this is maybe one of the happiest moments I've had in this whole process. And this is, you know, I'm going to talk about this a little longer than I thought I would, because this was a incredible moment for me. I was playing my own game, and I was playing it, and I was like, oh, man. Oh, that was cool. Oh, this was interesting. And I went, oh, wait, I'm having fun. I'm having fun with a game that I made. This is amazing. That is, I cannot convey to you how cool that is, dude. To have fun with a game that you made, that I've been working on for a while now, right? And I'm not a formally trained programmer. I am very much just going like, woo, here we go, try it out, see what we can do. And I'm figuring it out, and I'm doing like some courses and whatnot, but like, it's so satisfying to play this and go, oh, wait a minute, that was fun. I made a fun level. I'm enjoying this. I walked away from that moment feeling like no matter how this game does, no matter how it lands, no matter how many people play it, no matter how good or bad it is, I'm going to be able to look at this game and I'm going to be able to go, well, this is great. I made this and I enjoyed it. Like playing it and making it. Just having that one moment of enjoying it. I can look at it and be like, I'm so happy with this existing. I'm so happy that I started going down this road, that I started taking this adventure of learning to develop games, that I went in on this like extremely long and difficult process it takes so much. But I just jumped in. I was like, oh, screw it. Let's just explore this, right? We're just going to explore. That's all we're going to do. And I've ended up in this cool place where I'm sitting there and I'm playing with my own game and I'm enjoying myself. And then I realize that I'm enjoying it. And I go, oh my God, I'm having fun in like a very genuine way. I love that. I realize I'm rambling about it, but it was such an important moment for me. And I just wanted to share it because I'm so excited and I want to like capture that a little bit for myself too, just so I can like listen back at this and be like, oh my God, look, that's so cute. He was so excited. That's great. And then like look at my Steam reviews and be like, wow, 25%, mostly negative. No, I don't think it'll be like that. But but in case that happens, I will be able to look back and be like, yeah, but I'm like really happy with like how this has gone. And I'm really happy with what I've learned. And I do hope that other people will get that kind of joy out of playing the game and play it a little bit and be like, wow, this is really exciting. And that's one of the reasons I'm pricing it. I'm pricing it really cheap because I just want people to try it, and I just want to get eyes on it and have people try it out and be like, oh, that's kind of cool. That's interesting. Maybe he'll make something cool in the future too, right? Mostly I just want to share it, you know. It's going to be $1, by the way. I don't know if I've said that. It's going to be 99 cents. I am, in terms of time commitment, I am losing money on this for sure. But man, in terms of like education and like doing something that I've always wanted to do. Like I didn't know I always wanted to do it, but after I've started doing it, it feels like I've always wanted to do it. Does that make sense? I don't think I've always wanted to. I've always wanted to be involved in the making of a game, and like I've thought about making one, but it's not. Anyway, I'm rambling. Let's wrap this up a little bit. You know what? Let's just go to the last section of the podcast for this week. The tip for this week is there's no right or wrong choice, but there are good and bad choices. I'm not talking ethically. Ethically, I think there's a right and wrong, right? But I think there's, in terms of like success, I guess, in terms of making progress, there's not a right and a wrong. You don't have to make the right choice. Let's be very clear about it. You don't have to make the right choice. What you do want to do, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, as with everything in this show, what you do want to do is work towards the good choices and avoid the bad choices. There's not like, you can't guarantee that a good choice is going to lead to a good outcome. And so you can't call it the right choice. The right choice is the good choice that you're comfortable with, right? The wrong choice is the bad choice that is going to like have a really bad consequence, I guess, right? Like that's a way to look at it. But I think in my own brain, and maybe this isn't how it works for you, but in my own brain, if I think of a choice as right or wrong, then I start looking for the perfect thing to do. Or I start looking for the thing that I must avoid at all costs. And that puts me in this place of kind of anxious thinking. It puts me in this place of kind of like, this is make or break. This is too difficult. I can't do this. It puts me in this mindset that keeps me from beating Planescape Torment. It puts me in this mindset of like, well, I can't beat this. I'm going to make the wrong choice. No, you're just going to make a choice. Try not to make bad choices. Try to make good choices. And, you know, that's kind of that. And I think that's why I never beat Planescape Torment. At that point in my life, I could never beat Planescape Torment in the same way that I could never sit down and develop a game because I couldn't make choices. I was too busy going, Well, that's not right. That's not perfect. That is not the choice. I need to make the right choice, right? You can't. Well, for me, I keep saying this as though it's a broad rule. I cannot make a game if I am constantly trying to decide what is the perfect choice. I have to go in there and just make some decisions. And I have to try my best and make as many good decisions as I can and avoid the bad decisions as much as I can. And that's that. There's no perfect. It's not going to happen. You're not going to be perfect. None of us are. Again, ethically there's totally a right and wrong. But when it comes to making stuff, the only right choice is just making good choices that are probably good and productive. That's how I feel about it anyway. I didn't ask questions for your projects. I went on this whole thing. I forgot to ask you questions for your own projects. I've only got 2 this time. 1, who is this game for? And then 2, I think this is a fascinating one. Will the people who only play for 1 hour enjoy this game? If somebody only plays your game for 1 hour, are they going to enjoy it? Are they going to look back at it and be like, ooh, I like that game. I wasn't able to finish it, but ooh, I like that game. There's something about it. I don't understand why I don't play it anymore, but there's something about it. I think we can pull that off. That is an exclusive club, I bet, right? That's some good stuff. If somebody plays 1 hour and they're like, that's a good game, even if they don't finish it, yeah, that's pretty nice. All right, that is everything that I have for you this week. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode. I am hopeful that you will be here next week, and I'm looking forward to sharing some more thoughts with you. Feel free to join the Discord. Feel free to hit me up, send me messages, feedback, all that good stuff. That's the best way to do it. That's kind of the only way to do it, if we're being honest. Other than that, I will see you all next time. Have a good week, create some stuff, and have fun with it. Bye-bye.